The Internet, the iNet, the net. You've heard of it. You've read about it. You may have even seen parts of it. But what is it? Think of the Internet as a network of communication networks. Doesn't help enough? You access the Internet from a variety of points and through a variety of connections. You're saying to yourself, well, now I understand this Internet concept, this Internet concept a little better, but...
Fundamentally, the web is about direct connection between people and between ideas.
You can't have a life without internet access. And the UN, just last Friday declared access to the internet a basic human right.
Well, I think that the internet could have marked and still could mark a turning point.
We have to deal with the reality of the digital age, and that reality is of a stronger and stronger individual.
But I want to be famous. You are doing this because you want to be famous? Duh. If you like this video, hit thumbs up.
This is the imagination age. It's an opportunity to design emerging systems of a new global culture.
The virtual world gives us a sense, a false sense of security.
I would argue that no change in consciousness can happen without a corresponding change in technology.
People do very beneficial things together, and they do very destructive things together. And the technologies enhance our ability to do both.
We're transforming into something else. I mean, if we were to draw the Vitruvian Man today, we might label him the extended man, and he would be holding an iPhone.
We're all becoming kind of surrounded by clouds of data streams, and that data stream is feeding into one sort of giant sensing network.
But other than the human mind, internet is the next most complex thing in the world. And of course, there are some people who claim that one of these days, internet will be a bigger brain than all people put together.
The internet will reach a point where it is aware of itself, of its function, of its relationship to us.
You have to kind of exercise your imagination to comprehend it, and you enter into a realm that has long been the realm of fiction and fantasy.
But if we concentrate on man in relation to his control over his environment, no description is more apt than the description of man as a tool-making animal. And in the short history of mankind, the majority of the tools which man has made can be thought of as an extension of his muscle power. However, in the mid-1940s of the 20th century, a different kind of tool was invented. A tool for extending certain of the powers of man's mind. This tool is the electronic computer.
The internet itself came out of the DARPA project that was basically headed up by the University of California, Berkeley. It ran and was developed mostly on Berkeley Unix, and it was free code, freely distributed so that everybody could work on it. It's because of that freedom that the internet, in my estimation, that the internet exists today.
The internet carries information in the form of little containers or little internet postcards. The content, of course, is independent of the net, because as long as you can digitize information, it doesn't matter whether it's voice or video or a piece of a web page or part of an email. It just gets stuck into a packet, and the net doesn't have any clue about what it is it's carrying.
The internet is technically, it's a protocol. It's a set of agreements. And the protocol basically says, this is something of an oversimplification, of course, we will pass your bits along without interfering with them, without deciding which ones go faster or slower. We will simply pass all the bits along that you sent to us, so long as you agree, this other network, all the other networks agree to do the same.
The growth of the internet was entirely driven by email, and inventing communication media is really what makes us human. You can go back to our primate ancestors who were undefended, surrounded by predators. They couldn't run very fast, they weren't strong, they didn't have wings, they didn't have claws, but they were able to communicate with each other and they were able to coordinate collective action.
The internet is in fact us, the people who use it. So when a message sweeps through the internet, whether it's some funny tweet or something of worldwide significance or something that's very moving, it sweeps through because we are passing the message from one person to another.
A choice of two gives one bit of information. This is the amount of information that one on-off circuit can handle at one time. It can be on or off in a series of positive decisions. The system calls for the key to be either up or down. The code calls for a dot or a dash. The current flows, it ceases to flow, it flows. It is black or white. It is stop or go, on or off.
Digital communication in the last 25 or 30 years, physicists, many physicists, especially those dealing with quantum mechanics and cosmology, have come to believe that the universe itself is actually made out of information, and that every object in the universe, including you and me, every object is made out of information. And the interaction of the information within our bodies and the interaction of the information exchanged between our bodies and the world actually explains who we are and what we're capable of doing.
Everything we do is a piece of data. Every interaction we have is a piece of data. Every move we make is a piece of data.
Internet es el lugar. HTML es como el idioma de la conexión. TCP/IP se podría decir, es un protocolo que nos permite a nosotros hablar el mismo idioma.
When we watch them turning and wheeling, how often have we wondered what holds such birds together in their flight? Communication is that which links any organism together.
The internet is a very powerful global communications network that also has certain values built into it. It was decided very early on there would be a decentralized network of computers where no single computer ran the show.
The entire system is very distributed, very collaborative. People decide to interconnect. It's a business decision that they make. They're forced to do it.
And a lot of phenomena that we see out there in nature appear to be powerful because they are about open-ended, decentralized communication and collaboration. So you could say that in a lot of ways the internet is a physical expression of some of the best things that we have learned about what works in nature and what works in human nature.
We're wired for connection, and I really think all these technologies, they're just extensions of us. And what is the potential of that? How can we harness all of these tools and connecting ideas and people and take the world to a better place?
For example, that all the uprisings in the Middle East wouldn't have happened without the internet. Everybody realized, if we all just connect ourselves like a bunch of ants in an anthill, we can move mountains together. And so they did. They overthrew dictators one by one And that's just an example of what the internet can do on a global basis. And I have a feeling we're going to see that same dynamic being amplified more and more as time goes along.
Cairo is a battle zone as tens of thousands of protesters hit the streets, clashing with Egyptian security forces, all demanding an end to President Hosni Mubarak's 30-year reign. The government completely shut down the internet across the country very early on Friday morning in an attempt to stop people from communicating.
We are in an information war, and we are losing that war.
This is Robert Foster for Rap News once again, and what an eventful past few months it's been. History has certainly been happening, pyramids trembling and regimes unraveling, dictatorships being shaken in Tunisia, Egypt, Algeria, Bahrain, and now in Libya. And in media, an army of indie pioneers has emerged to pwn injustice through the cybersphere, facing riot gear with status updates and Twitter feeds, bringing peeps to the streets in corrupt state. And while the West stands by and applauds the protest, posing as the model of freedom for the rest, the world asks, where will the revolution begin next? Wait, it's our reporter John Pilger live from the Middle West.
The uprisings in the Middle East, North Africa region, and that sort of brought out a myriad of different responses from governments, from shutting down the internet to sort of really aggressive persecution of bloggers. So there's a lot that's still being settled, and I think all of these sort of fights and all of these sort of debates and these different policies, they're all going to settle out into someplace interesting, and it's going to matter because what we've seen so far, and I think what we're going to continue to see, is the real transformative power of the internet, and hopefully we'll continue to see a sense that the internet really empowering individuals and giving individuals more freedom than they had before.
Human society changes a lot slower. And so we kind of underestimate the impact of these technologies on kind of a larger scale. We're at the beginning of a large scale transformation in terms of how we organize our economic activities, how we organize our society.
I mean, on the one hand, it's great, right? Anybody, if what they say is somehow important or catches on, what they say, whether it's still attached to them or not, can spread through the entire globe. You know, the message of an Arab dissident or a kid somewhere, anything can go everywhere.
You see young people playing journalists and videotaping the horrors inflicted by dictators, in Egypt and Tunisia, and they're putting the YouTube videos and then they're being broadcast on, these bigger networks. It's changing us because it's empowering us, but I also think it's scary to the establishment because, they've had a business model that has worked for 50 years and all of a sudden they're starting to feel largely irrelevant, So I think it's frightening to the establishment, for good reason. It's in their nature to want to stay with what has worked, but you can't stop evolution. The genie's out of the bottle.
People kind of don't feel accountable for what they're doing online. They genuinely feel what they do online is sort of the safe haven almost. It just allows this permissiveness. I think you give yourself permission, like this is okay because nobody's going to know. Even though somebody might, there is that detachment between the online life and the real life.
Anonymity has given speakers throughout history the ability to speak freely, and that it's an important avenue for a speaker to take, depending on a lot of contextual elements, depending on what type of rights environment they're in, what type of message they're trying to spread. But the marketplace of ideas should function quite openly, and it should be an environment where it's real free speech. And free speech indeed depends on the existence of anonymous speech.
I'm actually very grateful to Hosni Mubarak for pulling the plug on the internet in Egypt, because it illustrated to the rest of the world how vital the internet is.
Like the group Anonymous that has been operating over the past several months. They've been knocking world governments offline, servers of world governments.
Anonymous is simply ideas without origin. May it be a phrase, a fad, a proverb. The concept of anonymous has always existed. The diversity of anonymous is as vast as the human condition. Thus, as the way of the universe, the good with the bad, the left with the right. Anonymous is the sum of its members divided infinitely. There is no control, no leadership, only influence. The influence of thought.
Whatever emerges from network behavior, from social network behavior, and what it kind of teaches us about who we are and as a collection of people and what's important to us.
The internet, for better and for worse, reflects who we are, how we think about things, what we're interested in, and the full range of imperfection that makes us human.
If you look at the WikiLeaks fiasco from this perspective, the government has its persona, which is what its diplomats and leaders say to the television screens. It's got its shadow self, which is these secret communications between diplomats. It's got a joker figure, which is Julian Assange, who took their shadow self and showed it to the world. And now the government is faced with a challenge. Do we self-actualize? Do we start to integrate our shadow self and persona? Or do we reject it and move towards tyranny? And the reality, when we look into this mirror of humanity that is the internet, we all act in embarrassing ways.
Light them all up. Come on, fire!
Right now, China, the government, can disconnect parts of its internet in the case of war. We need to have that here too.
I'm Robert Foster, and I'm pleased to see so many tuning in on the only remaining free frequency, the internet. This one narrow bandwidth, this one legitimate open channel to transmit locally, globally, unrestricted, is currently being threatened with a kill switch.
It is the internet's openness and freedom, the ability to speak, innovate, and engage in commerce without having to ask anyone's permission, that has enabled the internet's unparalleled success. This openness is a quality, a generative power, as some have called it, that must be preserved and protected.
We are at a very dangerous inflection point now. There are enormous forces that would like to centralize control over the internet. Sometimes for what they perceive as good reasons, sometimes for purely selfish reasons. Greed, let's call it what it is. There are people who are concerned about security who would like to see centralization as well, so they can control and know who's saying what, and that may or may not be a good reason, but it would be the death of the internet as we know it.
When you look at the new centers of power, for example, on the internet, when it comes to social networks or new companies, you have increasing monopolies of economic, political, and technological power. Obviously, Google and Facebook and Twitter are very good examples of this. So you can be on the edge and be incredibly powerful. And the ideology of the edge is just a new way of legitimizing a new elite. And that's as true for today's internet elite as it was true for the Bolshevik elite or the French revolutionary elite or the bourgeois elite of 19th century industrial capitalism.
I don't think the net really is decentralized. The net is a highly centralized set of servers. It's the way DNS works, the way it all works. I mean, people look at it as if it's really decentralized, but it's more centralized every day. And now that we're going out into the cloud, which again looks decentralized, my data's going to be out there in the cloud, it's actually a way to take your data away from you. It's no longer truly decentralized on your hard drive out wherever you live. Now you're going to re-centralize it and give it to Amazon or L3 or whoever it is that's going to manage the data for you.
There are only 13 root servers that control the entire network, global. The whole world rests on these 13 turtles. When you go to Greek mythology, the globe rested on turtles. So there are 13 turtles that carry the whole world. That is the favorite place where somebody wants to go. Go and kill a root server.
So in 1998, when we went to go testify in front of the U.S. Senate Governmental Affairs Committee to talk about the state of computer security, primarily in government, one of the senators asked, could you take down the internet or one of you mentioned that you could take down the internet. Is that true? And Mudge says, yes, in 30 minutes we could take down the internet. And all the flash bulbs started going off, and the camera guys were like run up to our faces and everything. And the media went crazy over this one phrase of, yes, we can take down the internet in 30 minutes. And basically what we were saying is the internet is not secure. It was never designed to be secure. There was all sorts of different things that you could do then, and possibly even now, to cause enough disruption to the network traffic to essentially take a portion of it out.
It's more or less a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. It's not, you can say, I was hit by a cyber attack today. It really hurt. But the fact is it's a very extraordinary and a powerful means to an end. So in theory, as you say, it can give a 15-year-old kid, the keys to a power plant. In theory, the keys to the Kremlin or air defense system, or in theory, of course, a 15-year-old kid could fire a nuclear rocket. You hope not, right? In theory, I'm talking about, right? All of these things are in theory possible.
There are big problems in the world. We have a great deal of hunger, and we've got wars here and there. We have people who are living a high life, and other people have practically no life. And somehow that isn't the way I think Mother Nature planned things.
Let's face it, nowadays we still have 2 billion people who don't have a solid roof over their heads and suffer from malnutrition. We have roughly, I think, about 1 billion people who still do not have access to clean water. We have a large number of people who are trying to survive in war zones. And as we can see, a large part of the world is becoming more and more explosive, namely Northern Africa and the Middle East, but also other areas such as South America and so on.
En estos momentos estamos sintiendo ya de alguna manera una crisis por el desarrollo individual o un grupo de personas que toman el desarrollo para sí mismos, para su propio beneficio, de alguna manera a costa de las necesidades o beneficios que otras personas pueden obtener.
100 kinds of crises, and they are pushing us to think about why that is, what we can do about it.
Мы их, они нас. Это все, конечно, очень горько пользователям, с одной стороны. С другой стороны, я считаю, что это, как я уже сказал, это отражение нашего эгоистического свойства, это нашей природы. И поэтому я уверен, что все вот эти проблемы, они должны ярко проявиться, они должны стоять перед нами как огромная одна большая проблема нашей природы, которые мы будем обязаны изменить.
All of these crises, you name any crisis, the bottom line reason that exists is this perception that anything can be separate from something else. It can't. It's all connected. It's all connected by space.
A billion people do most of their mind work in a shared, interconnected space called cyberspace.
So I think with the internet, we've created this framework so all of these ideas can be bumping up against each other. So I think more innovation is going to happen around some of our biggest problems. So if you can have perspectives from India, China, Africa, America, Europe around a problem, we're going to be able to come to a solution quicker.
Cyberspace is bigger than any given nation state. And so when legal questions in the future are decided, they are probably going to be decided to an increasing extent what's good for cyberspace. Not what's good for Liechtenstein or what's good for Burkina Faso or the United States, but what's good for cyberspace. And that is an amazing proposition.
These borders are really going to become much more of a fiction than they are today.
And when the borders become much more of a fiction, then I don't think you're going to see as many problems, like you said, of financial instability in one country spilling over into another country, because there's nothing really to spill over into, because we're all sort of one world.
Now add more nodes, more users, more services, more functionalities, and every single time you have one step forward, the whole system benefits. We find this phenomenon of emergent properties in a system all over the place. It is true in economics, it's true in social interactions, it is true in technological development. The internet is perhaps the quintessential emergent phenomenon. If there were not enough people out there, enough nodes, enough services, functionalities, and so forth, it will be completely useless.
And the more we transfer our consciousness into the internet, and the consciousness is really is the totality of everything we feel and think and say and sort of project from us. Once we move a large enough portion of it online, then something really interesting is going to start to happen.
The internet has made explicit a lot of the collective unconscious that was previously implicitly there binding us together. But by making the collective unconscious explicit, the internet will then lead to the emergence of amazing new things that weren't there before at all, just as did the evolution of language some time ago.
The ability of these machines to store information, manipulate, sort, and deliver it is fantastic. And with their complex feedback systems, their memories, their almost human reactions to situations, it is understandable that they are popularly referred to as brains.
With a point when a system becomes sufficiently refined and complex and subtle at doing what it's doing, complex in the interactions of its parts, that a sort of meta system emerges from it in order to control the underlying system. It moves one level up. The layer just below it can then get more and more complex and ramify more and more because it now has something on top of it helping to regulate it. And there's many examples of this in evolution, and I think we see that in human society now. As the global brain begins to emerge, so much complexity and diversity is flourishing on the level of humans, much more so than before.
The human brain has anywhere between 100 billion and 200 billion neurons. So you've got all those neurons working together in these fantastically complicated ways to give rise to consciousness, sensation, those things that we know to be part of our mode of being as humans. At this point, there are roughly 2 billion computers on the internet and roughly 2 billion humans. So that gives you a total of 4 billion nodes. And you can think of a node very loosely as simply any conduit through which information and decisions flow. I look at emergent structures on the internet now and talk about how they compare in primitive ways to brain functions that we know exist. So, for example, take Twitter. Twitter is a kind of global nervous system that reacts very quickly to new events. So I see Twitter as a kind of nascent amygdala. Now, in the human brain, the amygdala is one of the brain's organs that modulates emotion in the process of cognition. The amygdala is one of those things that says about an event, this is important, this is what you need to pay attention to. So without that feeling, without that sense of urgency, the brain wouldn't know what to focus on.
But people don't explicitly conceptualize it that way. They don't hold up their iPhone and say, hey, this is now part of my exocortex. This iPhone is now part of my mind, which interfaces me to the global brain that is another part of my mind. People don't explicitly conceptualize it that way, but that's still what it is.
And it's very easy to see how it aims to perpetuate itself. So for example, when you conduct a Google search, that's a beneficial interaction with the internet on your account, on your part. But in exactly the same way, the internet wants to give you this service because it's beneficial to it as well, because it collects information about you. It knows more about you, about itself, with you being a part of it. My service to the internet and the internet service to me are both mutually beneficial to us. This is a system that is going to perpetuate itself.
Yes, we are all nodes in something much bigger than us. You know, there is the biosphere, which is the aggregate of all of life, and then above that sits the noosphere, which is the aggregate of all human ideas and human intelligence. And the internet is a manifestation of the noosphere that was coined by Pierre de Chardin.
The Global Consciousness Project taps into that possible future being, which is a kind of consciousness for the whole Earth. He used the term noosphere. It's a sphere of knowing over the whole Earth. Instead of dominion, it would be something like management at last.
Так что в итоге будет образовываться такая единая система с единым глобальным желанием, которое будет выражаться через эту систему, глобальным знанием, глобальной мыслью, глобальным осознанием.
The internet consciousness becomes a sort of meta consciousness for every normal human. We have a situation where every eye on the planet can see with great fidelity what is happening on the ground at every moment. If you compare this to your normal human consciousness, this is exactly the way you operate. Something comes into your mind, and you can consciously decide that this is something that warrants more of your attention. And once you direct your attention to this perception, to this stimulation that you are receiving, then you can solve it using all of your conscious tools.
And though these people seem unaware of each other's existence, neither looking nor speaking, one group meets and filters through the other, with hardly two individuals coming in contact. So constant is the flow of information, and so complex the web of communication that keeps them apart and holds them together.
Increasingly, the self and the personal identity are things under our conscious control. You can sculpt your identity online in ways that you couldn't do before. On the other hand, everyone can see what you're doing. Everyone can watch you sculpt it. The ability to create virtual identities in virtual worlds like Second Life, I think it's symbolic of bigger things to come. I think it's symbolic of the loss of the traditional notion of identity and the replacement of the traditional notion of identity with something more flexible and more interesting.
People would come in and say, well, you know, when I go online, I forget who I am in real life. And so there's definitely this sort of break with reality with whatever activity that they're choosing to do online, whether it's gambling, gaming, porn, shopping. They kind of feel a detachment, a sense of this isn't really me.
Virtuality actually frees me from myself. Whether I like it or not, I am constantly thinking about me. You know, how I look, how to dress, how others see me. But I have this primary sense of self, this sense of I, and it's totally there to manage my survival. Except out in the real world, these eyes are like interwoven. So my sense of survival is inextricably tied to my other senses of I. So even if somebody insults me or makes fun of me, my primary sense of I is threatened. I overreact to situations. This is where the virtual world actually helps, because I'm well aware that I am behind a screen, that I am taken care of, I am warm, I am safe, and nothing can really threaten that primary sense of I. So now I have all this extra energy to allocate to different forms of connections because I'm not spending so much time and effort defending myself.
We are born into a specific time and place with a name, with a socioeconomic bracket, with all these factors that are very much tied to our physical world existence. And until this point in the human evolution, we run the risk of being ostracized from our communities if we reject cultural mores. That is what rebellion is in large part. It's rebellion against cultural mores, against expectation. And what the digital culture enables us to do is to create identities that are both harmonious with those physical world cultures, but at the same time to construct an identity that is more authentic to who we are, to the essence of who we are.
Дело в том, что мы всегда, все тысячи лет нашего развития, отождествляли себя с нашим вот этим вот животным телом. А интернет отрывает нас от этого животного тела. Когда неважно, кто я с моим телом, молодой, старый, черный, белый, желтый, красный, неважно кто и как, а я могу выражать себя изнутри себя. Этим я могу быть в этой системе. То есть не мои телесные характеристики, а мои внутренние, психологические характеристики, они переходят в эту систему. То есть мы отрываемся уже от нашего животного тела и позиционируем себя как «а кто я?». Не мое тело, а я человека находится в этой системе.
The internet has not only facilitated but highlighted the fundamental importance of internal contact between individuals, while at a certain point, maybe in the past, there has been too much emphasis, too much importance attached to the externalities. Ultimately, human beings are mental animals. We live within our minds, and within our minds, we can share and be in contact with someone else, even if that someone else is a billion light years away from us. It really does not matter.
To me, interfacing with the network is less about the feeling of exploring some sort of new territory, but I guess it feels much more like I'm facing internally, like that in some way there's reflections inside of this kind of like mass participatory behavior or social behavior that ultimately kind of like yields clues about what it means to be alive and why we should be here.
А часть затем из виртуального мы уже будем переходить к духовному подключению между собой.
It seems to me the fundamental requirement of being a moral creature is that you're able to see how the world looks to other people. The hyperlinked structure of the internet mirrors that. They are put in by people voluntarily because they want to send you away from their page to another page because they think there's something interesting on that other page. That by itself is a little act of generosity. I wouldn't want to make a big thing out of it. It's a little act. Nevertheless, it's the fundamental structure of the internet is defined by those hyperlinks. And second of all, when you put in a hyperlink, what you're saying is go to that other page and see how the world matters to some other person. That is the fundamental movement that defines being a moral creature.
It's important because it shifts the question from me, the centrality of the I, the centrality of the importance of my life, my choices, my interest, to the centrality of you, the other. You as someone else, as something else, or indeed as just something existing out of my own personal body, interest, ordinary life. And if we shift that outside the centrality of the picture, place ourselves around on the sort of periphery of the whole game, and place at the center what we care about, anyone in society is contributing to the well-being of the whole system. It's just that we need to take a moment to realize that it is not us at the center of the picture. Every time each of us is thinking about what's right and wrong, what should be done and shouldn't be done, but it's the system as such.
In the virtual world, we can experiment with different forms of connection that we're not usually used to. And it's a purer connection. It's a 100% connection because there's an awareness that the node must care for the system, that everybody is needed in order for the system to survive. The programmers, the people who create the land, the people who design the avatars. In this, we're actually equal. In our mutual concern for the system, we are identical.
Мы не решим окончательно, что мы должны из этого состояния выбраться, изменяя себя, не ухищряя интернет какими-то дополнительными проверками, системами и так далее, и менять самого пользователя, а не систему связи эгоистическую его с другими.
It is an affront to most people's idea of their own autonomy and free will, and they believe that this is Borgian. This is they don't want to feel as if that their autonomy is in any way diminished by a kind of a superorganism idea, and so there's almost like, well, if it is true, I don't want to be part of it.
People who grow up with the internet in their veins and in their minds are not going to be so shocked by the various developments to come in subsequent decades, and including those that dissolve the traditional notion of the self and the boundary between the individual and the matrix.
Just an emotional communion is not enough. Fascism offers emotional communion. You get people together and they march in order, and they've got great big statues, and they sing songs, and they've got trumpets. People can march off to war and do terrible things with that kind of communion.
Unity out of necessity, maybe, out of force, coerced unity, as they try to do in Soviet Russia and communist Russia. Those were all expressions of unity, but they did not stick specifically because this unity that we talk about has to include consciousness, has to include conscious participation. People cannot just, be pushed to it. They have to initiate it. They have to want it. They have to put it as the goal.
It is stop or go, on or off, one or none, go or no go, or black or white. In order to transmit the image, it had to be broken down to many points of decision, black or white. We know that such a limitation is not at all restricting if enough decisions are made. In this case, 500,000 decided points give fair rendition. 1 million would be better.
The force that is moving us through progress is an ancient force that began at the origins of the universe in the Big Bang, and it's this force of increasing order, self-organization. It began with the organization of the galaxies, which are persistent, and then stars, which are persistent. The technology is an extension of that. So technology is the extension of the same life forces, increasing the degrees of freedom, increasing the evolvability of the system, increasing complexity. And we are alive at that moment when we are kind of almost like the superorganism is organizing itself, and it's being born. We're kind of at the birth of the superorganism of connecting all the people to all the people on Earth and all the things that we make.
And the internet acts just like your neural network in your brain. It acts like clusters of galaxies. It acts like the root system of a rhododendron. It's infinite interconnectedness, kind of a modern technology version of structure that's been around, inherent in the structure of the universe for a very long time.
And we emerged out of nature, so maybe we are a way for the universe to know itself. The universe is moving towards self-understanding via us. We're not separate from it, we are it.
В итоге использования веб-сети мы придем к раскрытию внутренней сети между нами. Не через интернет. Это вот раскрытие этой внутренней сети между нами, эта внутренняя сеть проявит себя как абсолютно полная связь между нами, от сердца к сердцу, от мозга к мозгу, а между собой непосредственно связанные через не виртуальные, а через духовные связи.
And I think it's becoming more and more the neighborhood of planet Earth. And when I do something that is affecting people around me, I have a newfound awareness about it that I couldn't really have before.
If people can see choices between brighter futures and darker futures, then they'll choose the brighter futures.
It's humans. We're the ones who are programming it. We're the ones developing the tools. We're the ones setting things up. It's just human nature being transposed into a digital world.
The internet is a model of what we human beings ultimately should and probably will be able to accomplish directly, organically, and will ultimately produce a great place to be, a world that is actually a world of creativity, peaceful interaction, love, and maybe even a bit of ice cream once in a while.
Then you can see that care and respect are placing the human agent around in the circle, in a sort of collaborative enterprise, and at the center is placed the alternative entity.
If we can connect consciously, we will create something much, much greater than us. But only if our reason for connecting, our intention, is not for ourselves. Because you can't have 7 billion agendas in one system and have it be equal in any sense of the word. But what we can all agree on is the concern for the system. This choice to do something not for myself but for other, this attribute of giving, this is the center of a decentralized system. And that way we will all be aware and we will share equally in the sensation that we are creating, we are revealing something by our free choice and by our effort.
It means that we actually get to shape how it is, rather than deny that it's happening, saying, yeah, it's happening, but let us form the character in a way that brings out the maximum good.
Eventually, intelligence itself might become matter independent, and at that point, when we transcend matter, it would almost be like it's not that God created the universe, but rather that the universe led to the emergence of something where the metaphor of God might apply.
This is information. The proper use of it can bring a new dignity to mankind. Properly related, it can maintain a balance between man's needs and his resources. The computer, as with any tool, the concept and direction must come from the man. The task that is set and the data that is given must be man's decision and his responsibility.
The Internet, providing an essential gateway to the information age of the 21st century. The world of information is yours for the taking.